All right, hi there. We are on our Unit 1, Foundation of Functions, and we are on the open response section of our Common Assessment. So let's go ahead and work on these problems. You will listen as I read, and if you need to pause and do the work, please do so. So number 1, first I want to make sure we know what target we're on. We are on evaluating functions. This is the learning target. And then the problems underneath it will address learning target 1. So, evaluate f of -3 when f of x equals 5x squared minus x minus 1. As you recall, in evaluating functions, we either give you the f or the x value or the y value. Sometimes we call this f of x the y, and sometimes we will give you the x. If you notice, this is in the x spot. So you will be plugging in, not in here, you're going to be solving for this. So you're going to be plugging in 5 times whatever the x is that they gave you over here, squared, minus whatever the x is they gave you over here, minus 1. Number 2, if f of b equals 8b minus 7, what is the value of b when f of b equals 57? So here is the opposite. We are giving you this part. So you will plug this in over here and have 57 equals 8b minus 7, and then you'll solve and tell us. Next, still in the same target, now we are using the graph to evaluate the function for given values. So again, just knowing what we have, what they give us, here's our graph. So if f of -2, what this means is, again, they're giving us the x value, which means we go on the x-axis and we draw a vertical line at -2, and we see where this graph hits. B, we want to look at all the values of x when they give us f of x equals 4. So this is like they're giving us the y. So we go on the y-axis at this number, and we draw a horizontal line this time, and we list all the numbers, because this might have multiple ones, where that line hits when you follow it across. Number 4, use the table to evaluate the function for f of 2. Again, we should know that f of 2, they are giving you the x. So you look in here and you find the number across from it. 5. This is a story problem. So remember, we have our r of k equals something x plus something else. So we just have to figure out what function might model this. Remember, when we have our old way of doing it, we would have y equals mx plus b. So if you remember, the m is where the price may change. So we're going to see where per, each, every. We're going to see keywords for the number that goes in that spot. And then the number over here by itself, with no variable attached, is usually the one-time amount. A starting point, something like that. So, the length of a rope is 1.7 meters. Okay? So think about, would that be per, each, or every, or is that going to be a starting amount? And then it decreases, so that's the key word there, decreases by 0.12 m for every time a sailor tightens the knot. So you're going to figure out what goes in each spot. So r of k equals, so it kind of set up the y and the equal sign for you. You have to figure out They're having you use m as the variable instead of x. So you go ahead and do that. And then it says for b, you evaluate r of 4, so that's your x. So you're going to use this once you figure out your equation for a. You're going to plug this into the x value and explain what that means in the context of the problem. So you'll solve it and then explain what that means. Okay, here's your challenge question. So we're going to evaluate first f of 6. So we need to be careful. This is our x value. So when we plug this in, we first need to make sure that we plug it in at all spots needed. And then you're going to solve and find out what that equals. All right, let's go to the next part, the learning target. So half of this next page, or the back page, is learning target 1.2, function operation. So adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing. So 7 says you take function f of x and you add h of x. 2, it says you take that's 7, and then this is 8. It's not number 2, it's 8. So 2 times the function h of x minus 3 times the function g of x. Be careful with that minus sign. Number 9, we are taking f of x, and you're going to add it to 3 times g of x, and then you're going to subtract h of x. Okay? All the functions are up here that we're using. Okay? 10, just a hint, we want to do what's across the top first, and then whatever you get, you'll want to divide by 5 every single term. So first do the top part. So j of x, and then you're going to subtract 3 times h of x, and then you're going to add 4 times f of x. So remember, this is the distribute. You're going to have a lot of things combined like terms, and then whatever you end up with the top, simplify it, and then see what can be divided by 5 each term. And then you'll have your final answer. And our last part of the open responses learning target 1.3, function composition. So here's our two functions, given that f of x is 2x plus 4 and g of x is 1/2 x plus 3. So remember, if you want to, when you go ahead and put these in your calculators, you can change that. Another option is to have g of x equals 0.5x plus 3. That way, when you're plugging it into your calculator, distributing, that kind of thing, it might be easier if you don't have a fraction key. Okay? So 11, it says evaluate. And remember, we go inside out. So the first thing you do is g of 8. So you go to function g and you plug in 8 for your x, solve, and you get a new number. And then you plug that new number into your f function and solve and get a new number. 12. This is just written a different way, but again, we go inside out. So you're doing f of -4. So you go to your f function and plug this in for your x value. That's your x. You get a new number, and then you plug that into your g function last and get your final number. Okay, 13. This is like, these are the ones without the numbers. So there's just combining like terms. You're not going to get a final answer. So we're going to take g of x and we're going to plug it in to f of x. Very important. You plug it into the f of x function. Wherever you see an x, you plug in the g of x. For 14, same thing, but different functions. So you start by taking this first one here, the f of x, and you plug wherever you see an x, you plug that f of x function into itself and go from there. All right? 15 through, we're going to use the table to evaluate the composite functions at given values. So, we start with, make sure we're looking at the correct graph. This is g of negative 2. It gives you the x value, so you go in your g graph, and you find negative 2 in the x spot and see what's across from it. Then you use that new value, and you go into your f function and find what's across from it. So these are all done in the same method, but just different numbers. So 16, you start with f of 3, get a new number, and then g of the new number, and find the answer. And then 17, g of 1, you find an answer, and then you go back in and you do g of that new answer. So that is it for the open response. Good luck. Hopefully you did well.